We're having a great week. Great weather here in Western New York. Today, I think it had to be close to 70. I had to pick Lisa up from work, and it was just beautiful out. Uh, it was weird because I was up here today preparing in my study. During the winter, I usually don't do much up here because there's no heat ducts to the upstairs. Um, so it's nice to be up here to do the study and stuff, but I had to have the heater on because our house is so cold. It's like 62 in our house and it's 70 outside. So I have my heater on right now at my feet. It's nice and toasty. So tonight I'm gonna go in a different direction than what I was last week. I think last week could almost be just a single topic. It was pretty simple, pretty basic. Tonight is also going to be that way, but it's going to take maybe a couple more visits to do because I just can't fit everything in. And tonight we're going to be talking about the Zion. We all know what Zion is. The Zion perspective, and it's something I've read about in the readings I've been doing recently. By name Mr. Eller, Bernard Eller, and I just take what he did and added some and combined it with other stuff that I've looked at, and even some stuff I've done recently that I think this goes along well with, and it's good. It has a really practical application for us as we walk in the Lord every day. And so I'm going to start with Matthew chapter 13. We're going to read verses 10 to 17. If you want to follow along, you can. I am going to be reading it from the Passion Translation because I just think it's really rich in English language. It's really expanded, and I think it really gets some of the meaning out quite nicely. So let's have a word of prayer before we start. Dear gracious Father, we thank you for your word. We thank you for your Son, for the work you did on the cross, burial, and resurrection, that you could bring us freedom and grace and mercy and kindness, that you have desired to show humanity, that you have showed humanity actually from the beginning. And eventually, at the time when the time was right, you decided that it was the right time to send your Son to be born as a human being, as a man, to live on the earth and to go through the sufferings and the things he did in order that you could show who you are and the ultimate purpose that you had for us as believers and for the rest of the world as well. And we thank you for all that. Amen. So I'm going to read Matthew 13, 10 to 17. It says, "Then his disciples approached Jesus and asked, 'Why do you always speak to people in these hard to understand parables?' He explained, 'You've been given the intimate experience of insight into the hidden truths and mysteries of the realm of heaven's kingdom, but they have not. For everyone who listens with an open heart will receive progressively more revelation until he has more than enough. But those who do not listen with an open, teachable heart, even the understanding that they think they have will be taken from them. That's why I teach the people using parables, because they think they are looking for truth, yet because their hearts are unteachable, they never discover it. Although they will listen to me, they never fully perceive the message that I speak. The prophecy of Isaiah describes them perfectly. Although they listen carefully to everything I speak, they don't understand a thing I say. They look and pretend to see, but their hearts are closed. Their minds are dull and slow to perceive. Their ears are plugged and are hard of hearing, and they have deliberately shut their eyes to the truth. Otherwise, they would open their eyes to see and their ears to hear, and open their minds to understand. Then they would turn to me and let me instantly heal them. But your eyes are privileged, for they see. Delighted are your ears, for they are open to hear all these things. Many prophets and godly people in times past yearned to see these days of miracles that you've been favored to see. They would have given everything to hear the revelation you've been favored to hear. Yet they didn't get to see as much as a glimpse or even hear a whisper. One thing I found neat in this translation is it brings out the fact that Jesus didn't teach parables to confuse people. He taught parables, and the disciples had open minds. And because they had open minds and ears and were willing to hear and were willing to ask the questions, then they were given the knowledge. They were given what Jesus had to give. And I think that's what he means in verse 15, where it said, they would turn to me and I would instantly heal them. That's part of it. If they would turn to me and ask, if they would have an open dialogue and listen and open their minds, it's almost like the people that aren't hearing are, they hear Jesus start to speak and they plug their ears, something like that, because they really don't care. And they really don't want to hear, because they've already decided that they do not believe in Jesus, in who he is, or in what he has to say, because they have their minds made up. Or possibly they hear, they're not quite sure, and someone else kind of drags them away to a different opinion, and they decide that's good enough. And the other thing that's interesting, it says, but your eyes are privileged. The disciples weren't privileged in the fact that God or Jesus only talked to them and nobody else. They were privileged because they had open minds and open hearts. That's what made them privileged. It wasn't as if they were, selected out to get certain information that other folks didn't get. But, sometimes I think it's important to remember that when we talk about disciples, it's not necessarily in every instant just the 12. It could have been many people. There might have been many people standing around them and listening to what he said. These types of verses are pointed towards a certain group or certain types of people that just don't want to hear. They don't like what's being said because it's not something they agree with, and they have a totally different opinion on the scriptures than Jesus did. And I think it's important to understand about the parables. But the point here being is not to talk about parables. The point here is that Jesus frequently uses Isaiah, as Isaiah is quoted often in the New Testament. And much of the future of Israel, the future of what God was doing through Christ, is prophesied. It's prophesied in other places too, but much of it is from Isaiah. And I think we see Jesus in the temple reading from a scroll, and it was from Isaiah. And so, I think it's kind of neat here that he uses Isaiah in order to show that even from that very book that they supposedly know so much about, they really don't know much about. And I'm right here, but they don't want to hear. So the religious leaders, they failed to see. They may as well, as Jesus said, know nothing, because having all the knowledge that they had, Jesus is saying it's worthless. It's not getting them anywhere. It's not getting them anything at all. They think it's getting them something, but in the end, it's all going to be for naught. And that's what he means by it's going to be taken away, because it was useless information, or information that was read, and then they saw instead of seeing what they were reading with an open mind and open heart, they were reading it with closed minds and closed hearts, having a narrow view of what they thought was supposed to happen or was going to happen. And it, as we know, turned out completely different than what they thought. So I see this as disciples and people hearing the parables and asking Jesus what they meant, and other people who might have even understood the parables. They're kind of like, I think I used this last week, the week before, like a sponge. You get in our, sometimes we clean something and a sponge has been sitting around for so long, and it's like a little rock. And when you first pour the water over it, it just runs off. It doesn't want to soak in because it's hardened. It takes a lot of liquid to get it to actually fill up. And you think about the disciples as ones who have already been wetted. So they have water in them, but they're always ready to take in more. They're eager to soak up as much as Jesus could give. But the religious leaders were dry. Years ago, I went to Arizona for a company I worked for, and not the Air Force, but when I worked for FYE in Record Towns, we took over a chain of record stores out there. And so I got to go out to Arizona. And it was a fun time. But one of the things I had to ask when we were driving one of the expressways around Phoenix was, you went into these, if you're in Rochester, I don't know if it's still like this, but the inner loop used to be under the ground. Well, they had something like that. And there were these huge concrete, buildings, and they had what looked like massive pumps. And I asked what it was for. And he says, because when we have rain here, a big, good gushing thunderstorm, the ground is so dry, it will not soak up that water. And so they close off, if it's bad enough, they close off areas of the expressway, and the whole drainage system in the city, the public drainage or drainage system actually takes that water in, and it's pumped into these areas to keep most of the roads open. Otherwise, things could get washed out or get flooded, and it would take forever for that to go down because the ground is just not ready to take in the water. And I thought that was pretty interesting that, you never think of something like that. You think of, well, the desert, it must rain and it just devours the water. But that's not the case, at least in Arizona. It might be the case in other places like the Sahara, where I see people walking and they sink in the sand as they're walking. I can tell you, when I was in Arizona, much of the ground was not like that. It was pretty hard. And so, that's just how it was. They thought they knew everything. They didn't care. God was pouring out information through his son, and it meant nothing to them. And so you might wonder, well, what's that have to do with what you call a Zionist perspective? So let's get into that just a little bit right now. Jesus fulfilled this perspective in his life and through the cross and through his resurrection. The leaders and people, including the disciples, at least to some extent, beyond what Jesus would tell them, this wasn't the case, but they thought that the Messiah, the coming Messiah, was only for Israel. And they missed a very key component of Jesus and his mission. And his mission was, though he went to his own people first, as Paul also went into the synagogues first to start with, and then started going to the Gentile. In Acts, we see that the Spirit or God sent the folks to Gentiles. There were even some Gentile believers in Jesus' time, but his goal was not just to save his own people. His goal was to save the world. The Jews were not to be a secret club. They were to be an open community. Access to the kingdom was not just for the Jews. It was for everyone. And the Jews were not the key to the kingdom. Jesus was the key to the kingdom. And that's what they missed. And had they understood, or perhaps, I don't know, studied or something more in Isaiah, that's something I think they would have seen. Because I might have mentioned this in the past couple of weeks, but even think of Paul when he goes and he's preaching, or going to a community and teaching them. He's teaching them the things of Jesus from the Old Testament. That's the scriptures he had. So it was there. There's some that say they might have had some writings like Mark or some other things, which is possible, that they might have had some of that, but it was more, I heard the things that Jesus did. Of course, we know that Paul spent time with the Spirit where he was given a revelation, but largely that's what they had. And so it pointed to him. It pointed to Jesus. So they did not like this at all, the Jewish folks. I don't know percentage-based majorities or minorities, but for sure we know the leadership didn't like it. And actually, I was listening to, I had the Dwell app, and so I listened to the scripture sometimes on the way to work, and I was listening to John, and it talked about how even in the Pharisee sect, I think it was chapter 10 or 11 about I was listening to, and even they were somewhat divided. So some of them thought, yeah, this could be the guy, but the other ones that didn't believe it kind of overtook that, and a lot of them feared that they would be kicked out, wouldn't be able to go to their synagogues, and if you're a Pharisee and get kicked out, that's probably pretty shameful in your community, probably monetarily too, I would imagine. But so they did not like it. And so the question is that's posed here, is Christianity today as a whole, are we different? It's interesting because someone posted on Facebook a couple days ago, Dan Sheridan actually, something from David Bentley Hart. Now, I didn't read or didn't listen to the YouTube video that he pointed to, but he, Dan had written some things about what it was, and it was that Christianity seems like a kind of like a secret society. We have the answer, you don't, and it's almost like they have to have somebody suffer eternally in order to prop up or to elevate what their standing is. I have to, well, I'm saved and you're not, so you're gonna burn forever, and that's what you justly deserve. And if that wasn't the case, then it kind of, some Christians, and I know this because I've had discussions on social media, it knocks down their standing to them if God's going to offer salvation to everyone, and not punish them forever for not being saved. So, we don't believe that, I know, but Christianity as a whole, I'm not even sure how many Christians today really honestly believe that or not. But it's what's taught to many of them. So the Jews, as John called them, had an us and them attitude. It was us. The Messiah is coming for us. The Messiah is going to rid the world of Rome and other evil powers, and we are going to be the center of everything, and everybody's going to have to come through us in order to have anything to do with the kingdom or have anything to do with God. But that's far from what Mr. Eller calls a Zion perspective. And, honestly, as we go over this in the next couple of weeks, the Zion perspective he gets is all from Isaiah, but then we're going to, we'll continue to look at some places, especially in Luke, immediately anyways, where we see ideas of this universal perspective. So the Jews wanted glory, but they only wanted it according to human standards. And the glory was right in the midst of them, and it was growing every day. And, we know that Jesus was glorified fully through the cross. And, they just didn't see that. So it culminated every day. And, that's why he said to the disciples, you are so privileged to be here, to be alive, to be witnessing what you're witnessing, because you're witnessing something that the prophets and good godly people in the Old Testament times, your ancestors, the things that they really long to see. And I think, well, who longed to see that besides the prophets? Probably people that heard the prophets speak, that actually believed what the prophets said and took it to heart and thought, wow, this is really what's coming. This is really what is about to happen. It's like that, filled with hope in them, that they, even though they weren't going to see it, just knowing who was going to come in the Messiah and what he was going to do was pretty amazing to them. So we're going to read Acts chapter 3, verses 18 to 21. It says, but in spite of what you've done, of course, this is Peter and talking about what the Jews have done to Jesus in the crucifixion. God has fulfilled what he foretold through the prophets long ago about the sufferings of his anointed one. And now you must repent and turn back to God so that your sins will be removed, so that times of refreshing will stream from the Lord's presence. And he will send you Jesus, the Messiah, the chosen one for you. For he must remain in heaven until the restoration of all things has taken place, fulfilling everything that God said long ago through his holy prophets. So God spoke long ago that what Jesus was going to go through, what it was going to mean, not just for Israel, but to the world. I don't know if I have a reference from Isaiah for this tonight, but, he said the nations were going to stream to Israel. They're going to stream to Zion to see what God was about. It says, he says that the nations are going to be saved. He proclaimed, turn to me, all of you, and be saved. This was what God's goal was. It was what his plan was. And that's what was missed by Israel. And honestly, I think it's missed by a large portion of Christianity today, especially those who believe that everything's already planned out. God already knows who's going to be saved and who's not going to be saved, and believe in all those kinds of things. They're missing out something amazing. So they killed the prophet, and this isn't the first prophet that's been killed, and Jesus told them that. But the problem was, this prophet was the prophet of prophets. He was prophet, priest, and king. And so the Zion perspective was a full go, according to Acts 3, 18 to 21. The restoration was on its way. In fact, Jesus had to remain in heaven until all things have been restored. So pretty incredible things there. But the goal, as we see, is the restoration of everything, not just of the Jews, not all things through the Jews, not all things through Israel, but all things through Jesus Christ. They were looking for a holy war, and they weren't going to get it. Excuse me. It's getting a little toasty now down by my feet. So the warm air outside must be having some effect even with my heater on, because normally I'd have to leave it on. There is to be no holy war, though. That's one of the things they were looking for, especially the Zealots. They were looking for the Messiah that was going to come and rise up and, I don't know, rise up some huge Israeli or Jewish army, and they were going to go and take the Romans and maybe with angels and whatever else, and they were just going to wipe them out, and everything's going to be set up. That's a holy war. Christianity thinks the same thing is going to happen in the future, right? That's what they think. But the holy war, honestly, has already been fought. It was done, even though there was no fighting scene. Jesus was the holy war, the person of Jesus. The Jews missed it. But thank you for God and his grace, according to Paul, it didn't matter. They were going to be saved. All of them were going to be saved. Nobody would be excluded from this restoration, the times of refreshing. However, there was something for those who believed. There was something for them for believing and for sticking it out. But the holy war, as I said, was done. Last week, or I think it was the week before, we talked about reverse fighting. And that's exactly how Jesus accomplished this. So, what you could think of the Jewish thinking, the Jewish mindset must have been, well, if that was fighting, what did he free us from? What happened? What is it that we were freed from? Because Rome is still here. They're still on our backs, and they're getting even worse. They got worse as time went on. So the gospel, which began with Jesus' life, it began with what he was doing. It began with his holy war, came right out of Isaiah. And chapter 52, verse 7, of course, we're talking in here, it's talking about Zion, on the restoration of Israel. It says, how beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of the messenger who announces peace and brings good news, who announces salvation, who says to Zion, your God reigns. Happy is that person. How beautiful their feet are. Jesus announced that good news. He announced it. And he announced it in Jerusalem. So he announced it in the mountains, upon the mountains. He announced the good news. In fact, we know he went up to the pool of Siloam, and he announced who he was. All you who thirst, come to me. And I don't know how many people came up to him at that point. I think probably not many, because we read that before. There were a lot of grumblings in the crowd about who he was, who he wasn't. And I think it was kind of a shock to them to actually hear him say it, if in fact many people even heard him say it. But he announced it, and he announced it other times other than that also. John the Baptist announced it. The apostles went out after Jesus and announced it. Paul announced it. People that announce the good news, their feet are beautiful. And of course, we know in this passage, it's particularly aiming towards the work that the Messiah was going to do. But it was universal, and it has to be seen as for all things, not just Israel. And God declared that. So Zion is to be the center of salvation and the center of peace, the center of mercy, kindness, and grace for everyone. But, what Zion? Is it the actual Zion that they think of as Zion, the mountains that Jerusalem is sitting on, or is it a heavenly Zion? There is a Zion that's the center of peace, and it's certainly not on the world today. In Isaiah 52:10, so I did have a reference. It says, "The Lord has bared his holy arm before the eyes of all the nations." His holy arm is Jesus Christ. That's his holy arm. That's who he's bared. Look what I'm giving you. Look who I'm giving you. I'm giving you myself, and I'm here, and I'm showing you. He says, before the eyes of all the nations, and all the ends of the earth shall see the salvation of God. All the ends of the earth. I mean, these were things that were that the Jewish leadership had access to these. Jesus had access to them. Other people had access to them. I mean, they could be read probably on request. And they, if you went to a synagogue, like we said, they had the Targum, I think is, I mentioned it a few weeks ago, where they read actually the Hebrew, or it was in the Greek. They read it actually in the Greek, and then they had their commentary on it. So I can't imagine what their commentary was on some of these things, if they ever read them in the synagogue for folks. But because most people didn't have access to it or couldn't read it, but these guys had it. They had things like that right there in front of them, yet they couldn't see, or they saw, well, yeah, they'll have salvation of God, but it has to be through us, and it has to be by our rules, and it has to be for our glory. Jesus, he's a fake, he's a fraud. We know what's going to happen, and it's not what he says, even though it's laid out right before them. Luke eloquently, I think, in the first couple chapters, really does a wonderful job of laying out what we see in Isaiah. He says in verse 10 of chapter 2, but the angel reassured them, and of course we know this is the shepherds, the people tending the sheep. He says, but the angel reassured them, saying, do not be afraid, for I have come to bring good news to you, the most joyous news the world has ever heard, and it is for everyone, everywhere. That's from the Passion Translation. If you have a standard English translation, it's for all people, but it's for everyone, and it's joyous news. If any of those shepherds had been schooled by a Pharisee, they might have been taught something different than that, and that must have been incredible for them to hear. It's for everyone. And so why is the Zion perspective? Because that's what it is. It's the perspective that Zion is going to be, in Isaiah, Zion is going to be a center place where things are happening. And of course, that is exactly what it was. And when the things were happening there, it wasn't just for one group of people. I'd like to kind of, I was thinking about this today, and I thought, well, some of these things overlap in some things I've done recently, but, we had a class where I work, education, of course, never stops there. And we have all kinds of courses and things we have to take. And, one of them talks about a sandwich, which wouldn't be far off because we work with food. But, and of course, they use a burger. Well, I don't eat burgers. No surprise to any of you, probably. I do like burgers made out of black beans and other good things, but not of meat. So you take, it's kind of like 4 or 5 layers here. We have faith in cruciformity, our inheritance, the nature of the kingdom, and last week, learning to love. And that's 4. And over the past few months, I've been doing some things, and they kind of, I think, they kind of all fit together. I don't know if you get that, but it wasn't my intent to start with, but because they're things I'm looking at, I think they've kind of flowed along, and this one is going to be no different. Um, so, that's 4 plus today. And I thought of, and I went down to eat it soon after, not in the way I thought of it, peanut butter and jelly, because I love peanut butter and jelly. I can't eat a lot of peanut butter, but I eat unsalted almond butter. That sounds pretty bland, but actually it's not bad. With strawberry jam and just stacking them. When I was a kid, I would do that. I put the peanut butter on the jelly and then another piece of bread and another piece of bread. And if you use like Wonder white bread, it's nice and mushy and soft. I use little flatbreads, pockets. Again, not sounding as appetizing, but, and you could stick whatever you want. Lisa and I were watching something on TV recently. Maybe it was a commercial, and they had someone was breaking up potato chips and stuffing it in their sandwich. And I thought, wow, I used to do that. That is so good. But to me, that's what these studies are. They're amazing things. They all fit together. Like I said, you can stack them up and intermix them. If you care to go back and refresh on some of those, you can, because what I'm doing is kind of draws some of those things and brings them into what I got from Mr. Eller, because he doesn't point all these things out, because he sees things differently. So there are many atonement theories, and I'm gonna use his what he uses as models of atonement. Someday, maybe I'll sit down and actually write down the things from different atonement theories to me that make sense, because there's so many of them that people have. But his point is going to be Zion perspective is going to become the Zion atonement model. And how that works differently from other atonement models. And one thing he says, which I completely agree with, is you can't take any of these other models and say, no, they're no good, and just throw them out, because that's not the case. In fact, many of them, as he shows, are biblically sound, but they just don't tell the whole picture. And I think that's what he drives at. So there's just 3, and 3 others, and against the Zion atonement model. So you can think of different atonement theories, and you can lump them in with any of these 3. I did that. I started thinking about it. I thought, okay, well, these 3 kind of probably cover everything. But he's got the sacrifice model, which is rooted in Old Testament, and he calls it cult, which I found interesting. The Old Testament cult, but it's liturgical, traditional animal sacrifice system. Jesus' death was a sacrifice to free us from sin, similar to the animal sacrifice system. And I don't think that anybody would say that wasn't true. He's not saying it's true. The second one he has is the redemption model. This one involves Old Testament legalities. He says Old Testament. I would even pull that into New Testament, and honestly, I would even pull that into today, because there are many people who hold atonement theories that are very legal, very legalized in religious speak. We know that there are religious beliefs in the world today that have completely systems that are all made by men, and can be found nowhere in the scriptures. In fact, a lady at work, we were talking, there was a few of us there. She's an older lady, and someone had just had a baby, and she asked them about baptism. And they started going, it was like 4 or 5 of us that started going around. Oh, I was baptized. Oh, I was baptized. Well, where were you at? So what church? And I was like, oh, I wasn't baptized. I didn't get, at least I don't know if I got baptized as a baby. Maybe I did. It's never been shared with me if I was. And they're like, oh, well, then where are you going to be? Are you going to be in heaven or the bad place? I thought. And I just said, because we were talking about, I tried not to talk about these things at work because I don't want to get in trouble. But I just said, actually, I don't think there's anywhere in the Bible where it says babies have to be baptized to go to heaven. And they all just looked at me. And one of them actually said, "Oh, I don't know anything about the Bible. I just go by what they tell me." And I thought, well, there you have it. Legalities. And the legalities from the Old Testament were regarding slave purchases. A slave purchased from its owner by somebody else in order to set the slave free, or a ransom. And of course, Jesus paid the ransom to set us free from sin and bondage. And then there's the justification model, which is also legal, but it's in view of a courtroom and a judge, picturing God as the judge. And someone presents to the judge, which would be Jesus, my death has satisfied the payment, the prison time that everybody else is going to get because they're sinners. And so we have an acquittal. So the people aren't even tried because the one who died lays out his death as the reason why people don't have to be judged. And of course, that's what Mr. Eller has, but you start to think about that, and that doesn't exactly even go with what a lot of people teach either. But those are the three models he uses. So the idea of these models, I think, is he's using them to encompass models that most Christians to adhere to, or a mix of them. And like I said, none of them should be denied, but they should be, I think, explored. And I think they should be explored in view of other lesser known models or theories as well. It says, as I said, he said at least portions of all these can be found in Scripture. But in general, these views are all taken by Christians as individual. This is what he did for me. And it creates, again, that us and them. So yes, you believe, and so now that makes you part of the believing community, but you set yourself apart, and them, they don't believe. And so we know what they're deserving of, either as some teach annihilationism or universalism, or purgatory, as some say, where some might be trapped forever because enough candles weren't lit for them, and hell. So you put yourself into one of these communities, and when you get in this community, you kind of set yourself apart, and you say, well, that's me, and they deserve what they get because they don't believe. And you go out and say, witness to your friend next door, and your friend that says, no, I'm not interested in any of that. I don't believe any of that. And so your church or your leader tells you, well, you need to avoid those people. Don't be around them. These are people you can't associate with. If you do, then we're going to vote you out of our church, because you shouldn't be seen with unbelievers or people who drink or people who smoke or any of these things. And of course, I'm not saying any of those things aren't wrong, but the point being that we create that us and them mentality, and that's what some of these atonement theories can create. And it's the same thought process that the Jews had in their day. Was it's us, we're the ones, it's through us. And I think that that actually comes through in Christianity today as well. I mean, the vision people have starts to supersede the vision that God had, because they see themselves as correct, and God is ours. He couldn't be theirs. We can even read things where Jesus gets on the Pharisees for their attitude and judgment. He's eating with sinners. How could he talk to a harlot? How could he, talk to a robber? How could he have a tax collector as a disciple? All these different things that they might say. And Jesus is saying, I'm for everyone. God is for everyone. So, you know what? It's quarter till, and I know I usually go a bit longer, but I'm going to stop right there because the next couple things I see in my notes really are the next points, and I don't want to start and have to end them early because it won't make sense. So I think the main thing tonight, then, and just in a quick review, is to understand that God's plan includes everyone, and we want to be careful as believers that we aren't setting ourselves up as some type of secret society or secret club, or we invite, not secret because we invite others in, but when others refuse us, that they're just cast off, or we cut ties, because those things do happen. And that's what didn't Jesus say that too? You'd have to forgive me because I couldn't tell you exactly where off the top of my head, but he said that. I think it's in the whole thing with the empty tomb. They're cutting people off from the kingdom. They think that they're bringing people in, but in fact, they were turning people away because of their belief structure and what they were doing. And it was a limited perspective compared to what God had. And they didn't understand what the scriptures were telling them, even though they had the actual word of God in their midst, which is amazing. Amen.
There you go. All right, Dan, let's set the record straight. When we took Dan home from New York City to Erie, Pennsylvania, to see the grandparents for the first time, my parents had a fit because we didn't have them baptized, and we drove 500 miles in an automobile without them being baptized, So, as far as I know, Dan, you got baptized at Trinity Baptist Church, if you remember that. Okay, years and years ago.
But I remember.
Yeah, that was the deal, and that's good. I was thinking about something when you were talking, just the vent here. The favorite cuss word of people is what today? It has been for years. They don't say Jesus. They say Jesus Christ.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
And I was thinking, next time that happens, and every once in a while where I am at work, somebody will do that, usually a customer, But I wonder if I mentioned to them, do you know what Christ means? And say it's Jesus Messiah, the Messiah, who came to save the world, and do it as kindly as you can to somebody instead of the word Christ, because Christ is that's harsh, Jesus Christ. But Jesus Messiah, a whole different outlook,
Yeah.
As you see that. That thought just went through my mind. But at any rate, anybody else have anything they'd like to add?
Or Jesus the Anointed.
There you go, Dan. Dan knows that. Yeah.
The anointed.
Yeah. So many people are, they have a preconceived notion because of where they grew up and what church they went to and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And really don't have a relationship and don't understand how much love it really took on his part, to do what he did. So it's a blessing. Anybody else here before we close up?
Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Getting back to babies being baptized in the Bible. Dan 3, the thing that came to my mind, but I don't think he was baptized. I think he was dedicated, wasn't he? The Lord Jesus Christ, when he was brought to the temple. But who were those elderly people who died after they saw this old woman? I guess she was waiting for the Messiah.
Yeah, Anna and Simeon.
Yeah. So now Christ was just what? Introduced or dedicated. I don't think he was baptized, was he?
He was circumcised.
Okay, so that's when he was circumcised.
Yeah, that was part of the mother's purification rite.
And the only baptism was when John Baptist baptized him, right?
Yeah, and that was a washing. Yes.
Because I remember having a discussion with Ken, and he said, "Mom, I don't think I was ever baptized, was I?" And what is that? So I told him some years ago. I said, my understanding now from reading the Bible is water is just gonna get us wet.
Yeah.
And I was baptized at 14 years old, sprinkled when I joined the Methodist Church, then First Bible Baptist. I was totally immersed and up again. But I just had an opportunity again at that time just to reinforce that it's believe, and you believe, and the way I say it, till you receive him, you've got to invite him into your heart. God's not going to just enter there without your invitation. So whether it is believe / receive, or believe then receive, but I know I received, not when I was baptized, but there's a lot there. And you know, it's interesting though when questions like this come up in a work situation. In Dan 3, you've got your hands tied, as it were. but see, now my freedom would be to go back and say, you know what, I checked it out and there's no place at all. The only baptism was in Jesus Christ, you know, and just let it fly. But your job is on the line. So I never worried about that at working with CBS, because Don always brought in the big paycheck. I just had pin money. So I just told everybody what I knew to be true at that time.
Yeah.
Good. Anybody else have anything?
Well, there is one baptism, and that's of the Holy Spirit, right?
Amen. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you going to get more into this atonement theory, did you say, Dan?
You're not really deep into it, no.
Okay. Because I find that interesting, you know, how it actually is supposed to work. You know, well, you said sacrifice, redemption, or justification. But anyway, that's just, just something I find interesting and can't figure out.
There's
Exactly.
there's some time ago, in some of the things I was reading, I was introduced to a few different models of atonement I'd never heard of before, and so there's a lot of stuff out there. So, and I you know, not all of them I agree with, but you know, I can see where some parts of them can make sense, and I think honestly, overall, I think, like he said, the three that we just talked about, they all appear in the Bible and they all make sense, but it goes beyond that, and I guess that's what we're going to be looking at.
Right. I mean, you go back in history to the Reformation, all the reformers, they all had different ideas about it.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, praise the Lord.